There's scary movies, and then there's movies that make you genuinely uncomfortable in your own body. These movies don't just want to scare you. They want to make you deeply, deeply disturbed by the idea of having flesh. And honestly, they succeeded. Some of you are going to wish you'd never had skin by the end of this video, because these are the most disturbing depictions of body horror in horror movies. We're going to start with Together, which came out this year and immediately made people very uncomfortable about the concept of love, just like every single ex I've ever had. But anyways, this is one of my favorite movies that came out this year. I think this is one of the best depictions of body horror in the last decade. If you have not seen this movie, please go see this movie. It's amazing. Allison Brie and Dave Franco play a couple who go spelunking by accident and accidentally drink some mystery cave juice. You know how it usually goes, right? At first, they wake up with their legs stuck together. They're like, this is weird, but it's probably fine. It's just like moss, or I forget the word he said, but it was some sort of like, I don't know. It's classic denial. But then every single time they try to separate, they get dragged back together by some supernatural force. And I mean every single time, including during adult fun time, which results in their thingies getting stuck together. And the movie shows this, and there's a lot of pain, let me just put it that way. Things escalate because of course they do. Their arms start fusing together, so Millie decides the logical solution is to saw them apart with like a regular power saw while they're attached. The sound design during this scene apparently made people leave theaters, which honestly seems like a reasonable response. The movie keeps going though. More body parts start to merge, and they find out other people in this cave church have turned into flesh blobs too. There's a neighbor in the movie who's like a coworker of Millie's, and you think he's like trying to bang Millie. Like that's obviously what the movie is setting up. But then you find out he's secretly gay. And not only is he gay, he's actually two people that turned into one already because it's a part of a local cult. How much acid was the person making this movie on? I want some. Anyways, this neighbor tells them that the only happy ending is complete fusion. So they decide to embrace it. They let their bodies completely merge into one person they call Tibbley. That is a horrible name. The final shot is this combined person that looks oddly like both of them, but not like them at the same time, greeting Millie's parents at the door. You know, just a normal family visit. What would you do if you walked home and you found out your daughter and her boyfriend of like 6 years were now one person? I would shit myself. Anyways, if you're as stupid as I am, the whole thing is a big metaphor for codependency. Except instead of being emotionally unhealthy, you literally become one organism. Critics loved it because apparently we needed a movie about toxic relationships where the toxicity is actually body horror. And I'm a fan because regular romance dramas are so goddamn boring. This was fun. Look, this is Mr. Flapjack, and he says if you don't like this video and subscribe to the channel and give it some hype points, he's gonna show up in your bed tonight. And now you may think he looks like a cute little corgi that will do nothing. But let me tell you, he is nicknamed the sock demon in my household because he rips holes in every single one of my socks. You have been warned. But individual body horror can hit way harder than a shared trauma between two lovers. The Fly is what happens when science goes wrong, and Jeff Goldblum gets really into method acting. He plays the scientist who builds a teleporter, which already seems like asking for trouble. During his first human test, a fly gets in the pod with him. Their DNA gets mixed up, and Goldblum starts turning into what the movie calls Brundlefly. Now, this isn't a quick transformation. Cronenberg makes you watch every gross detail over weeks throughout the film. First, Goldblum gets really strong and energetic. He thinks it's great. Then his fingernails start falling off. Then his skin gets bumpy and grows weird hairs. He then starts throwing up on his food before eating it because that's how flies digest things. The movie keeps a collection of his body parts as they fall off. Ears, teeth, whatever he drops off gets stored in a medicine cabinet. He shows them to his girlfriend like souvenirs. Look, honey, my human bits. By the end, he's this gross insect thing crawling on the ceiling. His human shell literally peels off to reveal the final bug form underneath. The practical effects were so nasty, they won an Oscar, probably because they made the judges all sick. What makes this worse than other monster movies is that Goldblum stays conscious the whole time. He knows what's happening. He's desperately trying to find a cure, while his body betrays him piece by piece. You're watching someone you care about rot away, and there's nothing anyone can do about it. This movie came out during the AIDS crisis, and a lot of people saw it as being about terminal illness. Watching your body destroy itself while the person inside stays the same. Cronenberg said it could be about any disease or getting old, which isn't really exactly comforting. Critics actually called it the most touching romance of the year, which tells you something about what the fuck critics think about in their spare time. Literally, you need to check their browser histories. But moving on, at least we can talk of the movie where Kevin Smith went full ridiculous with his premise. Kevin Smith heard someone joke about a human centipede but with a walrus and thought, yeah, I should make that. So he did. Justin Long plays a podcaster who goes to interview some old guy in Canada. Big mistake there, buddy. Don't go to Canada. Don't do it. Bad choice. The old guy drugs him and decides to turn him into a walrus. Not kill him, turn him into a walrus. The whole movie commits to this idea with complete seriousness. Smith shows the transformation step by step. First, the guy cuts off Long's legs. Then he sews his arms to his sides to make flippers. Then he fits him into this gross skin suit made from previous victims and his own skin. The tusks are then made from Long's own leg bones, which someone definitely got paid to think up. The finished walrus man looks absolutely horrible. Long can only make these weird bellowing sounds, and the movie holds on these shots way longer than anyone wants. You can see him trying to communicate, but he's trapped in this blob of flesh and skin. What makes Tusk extra weird is that it's half comedy. In fact, Johnny Depp shows up as some bizarre detective character, probably because he owed Smith a favor. The tone bounces between legitimate horror and complete absurdity. People either love it or think it's the dumbest thing ever made. I think it's both, and that's why it's perfect. Because the practical effects are genuinely disturbing though. When they reveal the final walrus form, it looks real enough that your brain goes, wait, is that actually a person in there? The answer is yes, and that makes it worse. Smith based this on a fake internet ad about someone wanting a roommate to dress as a walrus. He turned a Craigslist joke into a feature-length body horror. The internet was a mistake, you sick people. But at least you could trust a walrus man to stay put, right? Well, not the Thing. John Carpenter's The Thing takes place at an Antarctic research station where nobody can trust anybody because the monster could be wearing their friend's face. The alien doesn't just want to kill people, it perfectly copies them, down to their memories and personality. This creates the worst possible scenario. Your buddy could be a monster pretending to be your buddy, and you never know it until he decides to eat you. The paranoia drives everyone insane, which is exactly what Carpenter wanted. The special effects still make people uncomfortable 40 years later. In my hot take, I think practical effects look way better 40 years ago than they do today. Why? I think we just gave up and decided to put it on a computer. We need to stop doing that. There's literally a scene where they're trying to save someone with a defibrillator, but then the guy's chest opens up into a giant mouth and bites the doctor's arm off. Then the guy's head falls off, grows spider legs, and crawls away. Why? I don't know, but it's scary. Literally every single transformation scene tops the last one. Bodies split open and reveal writhing masses of flesh and teeth. People melt and reform into impossible shapes, and faces stretch and distort. The dog scene alone probably gave kids nightmares for decades. Rob Bottin did the creature effects, and they still haven't been topped. Everything looks wet and organic and completely wrong. The creature moves in ways that shouldn't be possible, which makes your brain reject what it's seeing. Unfortunately, this movie flopped when it came out because critics thought it was too gross. They said it was just shock value with no story. They were dumb and wrong, but it took years for people to realize that. Now it's considered one of the best horror movies ever made. What really gets you is the ending. The two survivors are just sitting there in the cold, and neither of them trust the other. The movie ends with them just staring at each other, waiting to see who's really human. No resolution, no answers, just paranoia in the freezing cold. And speaking of paranoia, wait until you see what vanity does to some people. Demi Moore plays an aging fitness star who tries a black market drug that promises to make her young again. The drug works, but there's a catch. There is always a catch. The younger version of herself literally peels out of Moore's back through a slit in her skin. Her name is Sue, and she's perfect. Glowing skin, perfect body, everything Moore used to be. They share one consciousness and swap every 7 days. Sue gets to live while Moore's body stays unconscious. Here's where things get messy. Sue has to drain spinal fluid from Moore's sleeping body to stay stable. Miss a day and bad things happen. Like really bad things. Moore's finger turns into this gross wrinkled stick when Sue breaks the rules. Sue gets greedy though. She starts staying awake longer, taking more fluid, and Moore's body starts falling apart faster. Her back develops a hump. Her face gets all saggy. She turns into this horrible old witch-looking thing that barely looks human. Final act goes completely insane. Sue tries to make another younger version of herself, and everything goes horribly wrong. The two women fuse into this blob monster with two faces. It calls itself Monstru Ilasu, which is both disgusting and somehow hilarious. This thing stumbles around on a stage during a live TV show, spouting extra arms and growing new heads. When it gets decapitated, the head just grows back. Then the whole creature explodes into blood and guts all over the audience. Demi Moore won a Golden Globe for this performance. She literally turned herself into a gross monster and won an award for it. The movie got Oscar nominations too, which means yes, people in suits had to sit there through the flesh blob scene and vote on it. This year's Oscars were pretty bad in my opinion. I wish The Substance won, but oh well. But technology makes everything worse, including your actual flesh. James Woods runs a sleazy cable channel and finds this pirate broadcast called Videodrome. It's just torture and murder, but he's obsessed with it. Then the signal starts changing his body in ways that don't make sense. His stomach opens into a slot where you can insert videotapes directly into his organs. The opening looks gross and fleshy, and people stick tapes in there while he moans. What the Wood's hands fuse with a gun at one point. The pistol becomes part of his arm. The veins literally grow over the metal. He can't let go because there's nothing to let go of. The gun is his hand now. Everything this movie breathes when it shouldn't. The TV set bulges in and out. Videotapes feel warm and alive. Technology stops being technology and becomes body parts. Yes, your cable box could sprout arteries tomorrow. Cronenberg made this because he wants us thinking about how media changes us. He just decided to make it literal. Instead of TV rotting your brain, it rots your actual flesh. The signal rewrites your DNA. Woods ends with a grenade in his stomach slot and blows himself up while saying, "Long live the new flesh." The movie suggests he transcends reality, but honestly, for being really honest with herself, he just exploded. This came out in 1983 and people had no idea what to do with it. The box office was terrible, but now everyone acts like it predicted the internet and social media. Apparently, Cronenberg saw our future, decided we'd all become part television eventually. The practical effects still look disgusting 40 years later. Pulsing meat TVs and handguns that grow veins. Someone sculpted all of this by hand, which means they spent weeks making flesh that moves wrong. But moving on from that, let's talk about rich people and the phrase "eat the rich," except the rich kind of flip it around. Society starts as a teen movie about a kid who doesn't fit in with his wealthy family. Turns out there's a good reason for that. His family aren't actually human. The rich people in this town are shapeshifters who feed on the lower classes. Not in some abstract way though, like in our current society. They literally absorb poor people into their bodies during a massive orgy for nutrition. I am not making a word up. It's literally the most direct eat the rich movie ever made, except backwards. The climax happens at a fancy party where all the wealthy families reveal their true forms. They melt together into this writhing mass of flesh and limbs. Arms stick out of torsos, faces emerge from stomachs, and the main character's dad pushes his head out of his butt. Editor, roll the clip.
I am a butthead.
This scene is called the shunting, and it goes on for 20 minutes. Yes, 20 minutes of rich people turning into flesh soup and absorbing poor people. The special effects look like someone dumped a whole truckload of hot dogs into silly putty and then gave it to a kid. Billy Warlock plays the main character, and he spends most of the movie thinking he's going crazy. His parents keep contorting into impossible shapes when he's not looking directly at them. His sister appears in the shower with her torso twisted backwards. You know, normal family stuff. The movie is Brian Yuzna's way of saying wealthy people are parasites who literally feed off everything else. He based it on nightmares he had about class warfare. Most people just have anxiety dreams about forgetting their pants or not being able to live the life they want. This guy dreams about rich people turning into meat blobs. But to be honest with you, do I think this is legit? No, because who dreams about that type of stuff? This guy probably just wanted to make a movie about meat blobs that are rich, and that's completely fine, but dude, just be honest about it. Like, nobody cares. Have you seen what half the people watching this channel's right now browser history is? I wouldn't be ashamed about anything after that point. Society flopped in America, but did well overseas. Probably because other countries understand class conflict better. It's become a cult classic now. I wonder why. Maybe wealth inequality is becoming a larger issue. And speaking of things that look too real, let's talk about when practical effects peaked in 1981. John Landis decided to show a werewolf transformation in full detail under bright lights with no cuts or fade outs. This was a terrible idea that worked perfectly. Let me explain. David Naughton sits in a living room while his body reshapes itself for 3 straight minutes. His bones crack. His spine bends the wrong way. His face pushes out into a snout while he screams. This camera just sits there and watches. In fact, Rick Baker built mechanical rigs that stretched Naughton's limbs in real time and added air bladders under fake skin that made his face bulge and shift, with fake hands that extended into claws while the camera rolled. Everything happened live on set with actors operating the effects from underneath. The transformation scene traumatized kids for years. Parents took their children to see a werewolf movie and got a medical documentary about bone restructuring. Naughton sells the agony so well that you feel every joint popping out of place. This was 1981. Home video barely existed. If you wanted to see how they made movies, you had to wait for the behind-the-scenes TV specials. Nobody knew this was just rubber and cables. It looked like they actually done turned a man into a wolf. In fact, this was so well done that Baker won the first ever Oscar for makeup effects. The Academy created a new category specifically because of this transformation. 40 years later, CGI werewolves still don't look as convincing as Baker's mechanical puppet work. The movie balances horror with comedy until the transformation scene hits. Then it's pure nightmare fuel. Landis knew exactly when to stop joking around. The werewolf reveal is just a glimpse, but it's enough to ruin your night. Modern audiences expect CGI shape-shifting. Back then, if you saw a body change on screen, someone actually built a way to make that happen. The magic was real, which made the horror real too. And speaking of crazy practical effects, let's move on to a period in society where modern filmmakers added cars and daddy issues and women that have with cars. That is not a metaphor. If we were in the Cars universe, this girl would have banged Tomater. Like, that's the most easy way of explaining this to you. Titane won the highest prize at Cannes Film Festival, which means fancy French people sat through a woman having sex with a car and decided it was art. Good for French people for coming around being more inclusive of car people relationships. I'm so proud of them. I just didn't know they could end in pregnancy. Agathe Rasool plays Alexia, who has a metal plate in her skull from a childhood accident, which after watching this movie doesn't really make a ton of sense other than the fact that she's part like metal so she could kind of like get pregnant from the car. But like, really, if we're already letting cars get people pregnant, do you need to have metal in your body? Like, I don't know. There's a lot of weird stuff in this movie, I'm being honest with you. Anyway, Alexia is an adult. She works as a dancer at Car Shoes, but she's way too into cars. Like, you know those guys on Tinder and other dating apps? I wouldn't know, by the way. I've just heard about this. Don't say anything. But like the guys that are super into their cars, like they just post videos and photos of their cars. Basically, she's that, but she car. And if you don't need me to say it for like the 5th time, she gets pregnant from the cars, and yeah, she's having a baby. The pregnancy isn't normal, thanks Captain Obvious. Motor oil leaks from her body instead of blood. Her skin cracks open to show metal underneath. Her belly grows at super speed because apparently car babies don't follow human development schedules. But here's the weird part. Alexia is also a serial killer on the run, so she disguises herself as a missing boy named Adrian. She breaks her own nose with a sink and binds her growing belly and shows up at this fire station claiming to be the chief's long-lost son. Vincent is the fire chief, and he's so desperate to have his son back that he doesn't question why Adrian looks completely different, or why he won't talk, or why he's obviously a woman. Vincent just wants a kid so badly that he'll accept anyone. The body horror gets mixed with his genuine father-son relationship for 5 seconds. Just wait. Vincent takes care of Alexia while she's secretly pregnant with a half-car baby. He teaches her to shave and fixes her meals. It's weirdly touching for a movie about automotive reproduction. When Alexia finally gives birth, the baby has a metal spine and car parts. And right before the scene, she tries to like seduce her fake dad. French people, what the fuck are you doing? Anyways, Vincent holds this mechanical infant and accepts it as his grandchild. The movie ends with this makeshift family just being happy together, which is probably the most disturbing part. Director Julia Docanaro, sorry I'm not saying that name correctly, my bad, made people faint in theaters, then made them cry. That takes skill. But some people just volunteer for their body modifications though. They don't gotta go get pregnant from Lightning McQueen and Tomater. Let's talk about Hellraiser. Clive Barker created the Cenobites, who are demons that don't understand why anyone would want pleasure without pain. They consider this a character flaw that needs correction, which honestly I don't understand, because any amount of pain and I cry like a little bitch. These guys are just like in a whole like kinky freaky world where they're like, give me the crazy stuff. Wild. Anyways, Frank opens a puzzle box and then gets torn apart by chains with hooks on them. The Cenobites do this calmly, explaining that he asked for extreme experiences. What you don't realize is that Cenobites are like 50-year-olds stuck in a marriage that should have ended 15 years ago. Because based on what I know about the world, they act entirely the same. If you don't understand that, You will one day. Later though, Frank comes back to life when blood drips on his remains. His body rebuilds itself from bones and organs up, which looks exactly as gross as you'd expect it. He's missing skin though, so he walks around looking like a medical diagram come to life. Frank convinces his former lover Julia to bring him victims so he can steal their skin. Julia agrees because apparently a skinless ex-boyfriend still has Riz. How is this dude getting a date? And then there's people like me out there that are lonely forever. He literally is missing his skin. Anyways, my ugliness aside, let's move on. The Cenobites show up wearing leather and sporting creative body modifications. Pinhead has nails driven to his skull in a grid pattern. Another has his lips pulled back with hooks. They treat this as formal wear. These aren't mindless monsters. They're philosophers who happen to think agony is enlightening. Pinhead speaks in this calm, measured voice while explaining why they're going to experiment on your flesh. He's genuinely trying to help you understand pain better. Why? Just because it's fun. When they finally reclaim Frank, the chains come flying out of nowhere to grab different body parts. Frank gets pulled apart in several directions while screaming, "Jesus wept." The Cenobites find this educational. Barker turned sadomasochism into a religion with really dedicated priests. The Cenobites aren't evil. They're just extremely committed to their belief system. I think everyone should try their methods at least once. And the practical effects make every torn piece of flesh look real, which was probably the whole point. But other filmmakers skipped this smart philosophy in their body horror and just went to the most fucked up thing possible: the human centipede. Tom Six had an idea that was so gross he kept it secret from investors until after they gave him the money. Smart business strategy. I call that a scam, but you know, profit. The idea was to sew 3 people together, mouth to butt, creating a single digestive system. Dr. Hyder is a German surgeon. Oh wow, big shock there. His name is what? Dr. Hyder. Let's replace a couple letters in that name and what do we get? Anyways, he's a German surgeon who captures 2 American tourists and a Japanese man, and he explains his plan with medical diagrams, pointing out exactly where he's gonna make every single cut. The guy treats it like a legitimate medical procedure, which makes it infinitely worse, and he keeps spouting something about like 100% medically accurate. The surgery happens off screen, but we see the results. 3 people on their hands and knees, surgically connected. Their kneecaps have been removed so they can't stand up. They can only crawl around as one unit. If you need me to spell it out for you, the middle person has to swallow whatever the front person produces. The movie doesn't like show this happening, but it shows enough of it happening that you know what's going on. The sound design itself tells you everything you need to know about the situation. Anyways, Six filmed this movie as seriously as possible. There was no winking at the camera, no acknowledgement that the premise is insane. Dr. Hyder trains the centipede like a pet, shouting, "Feed her" when nature calls. The victims just cry and try to communicate through their muffled sounds. Hopefully the first person wasn't having Taco Bell. What makes this worse than other torture movies is how matter-of-fact all of it is. Dr. Hyder isn't evil or angry or whatever. He's just really into this surgical project. Like, really into it. It's weird. The movie became famous before most people even saw it, because everyone heard about the premise and decided they didn't need to actually watch it. The phrase human centipede becomes shorthand for anything disgustingly gross. 2 sequels followed, each one trying to top the original shock value. The first one stays relatively restrained though. Most of the horror comes from knowing what's happening rather than seeing it in detail. Not the second though. The second is incredibly disturbing and messed up. And then the third becomes a comedy that just makes fun of the first 2 movies. Insane. But let's now move on to when metal makes bodies even weirder. Shinya Tsukamoto made Tetsuo on basically no budget, using stop motion and practical effects that look like a fever dream. A Japanese office worker starts turning into a pile of scrap metal after hitting a metal fetishist with his car. Yes, apparently that's a profession these days. The transformation begins small. A piece of metal pokes through his cheek while he's shaving. Then more metal bursts through his skin. Wires and rods sprout from his flesh, and his body becomes a junkyard that's somehow still alive. The most infamous scene involves his turning into a giant drill. His girlfriend tries to bang him and nearly gets impaled, quite literally. The movie treats this as both horrifying and weirdly erotic, which probably says something about what was going on in that period of history in Japan, which probably says something pretty weird about what the director thinks about it at night. Anyways, everything happens at breakneck speed with clanging industrial music. Camera shakes constantly. Stop motion makes the metal transformations look jerky and unnatural. unnatural. Your eyes can barely process what's happening before the next gross thing appears. By the end, the protagonist is more machine than human. His body has become a walking pile of scrap metal powered by rage and confusion. He can barely be called a person anymore. The whole thing runs only about 67 minutes, but it feels both much longer and much shorter. Longer because it is so intense, and shorter because it moves too fast to fully absorb what the fuck is going on. Tsukamoto crammed every disturbing image you could think of into just over an hour. This became a cult classic despite being basically impossible to understand. If I'm being honest with you, there is barely a plot. Just a guy turning into metal while industrial noise plays. And the amount of stop motion animation looks both goofy but also insanely disgusting at the same time. And the black and white cinematography makes everything look like security footage from hell. And if you want one more fun fact about this movie, Quentin Tarantino loves this movie, which tracks. If anyone would appreciate an hour of flesh turning into machinery and a drill trying to bang a girl, it's him. Why do I say that? Just Google Quentin Tarantino and feet. You will be horrified. But now let's move on to when David Lynch decided domestic life was the real horror. Cause like life sucks, right? Lynch made ERASERHEAD over 5 years in his spare time, which explains why it feels like a recurring nightmare that won't end. Henry Spencer lives in a gross industrial wasteland and finds out his girlfriend had his baby. The baby is not a human. Nobody knows what Lynch used to make the baby prop. He's never told anyone in 47 years. It could be a dead animal. It could be manufactured parts. It could be something Lynch found in his garage. The thing looks real enough that your brain can't figure out what it's looking at. The baby is small, pale, and constantly makes these horrible wheezing sounds. It's wrapped in bandages most of the time, but you can see enough to know if something is very wrong. The face looks like a cross between a lizard and a premature infant. It never stops crying. Henry has to take care of this thing while living in a radiator-heated apartment that sounds like a factory. The whole movie is just industrial noise. Steam hissing, machines humming, and metal clanking. Lynch recorded these sounds in actual factories and layered them throughout the film. Taking care of this baby drives Henry insane. The thing gets sick and breaks out in gross sores. When Henry tries to help by cutting its bandages, the baby's organs spill out everywhere. The creature screams and dies while Henry watches in horror. But that might have been a hallucination. The movie never clarifies what's real and what's Henry's breakdown. Lynch fills the runtime with surreal images that don't make any logical sense. A woman with swollen cheeks sings in Henry's radiator. Sperm-shaped creatures fall from the sky, and Henry's head gets chopped off and turns into pencil erasers. I don't know what's going on either. Lynch has said that the movie came from his own fears about becoming a father. He was broke, living in Philadelphia, ouch, that would have sucked, and terrified of having to support a family. So he made a movie about the worst possible version of parenthood. But 45 years later, Cronenberg decided to make surgery entertaining and pleasurable. Let's talk about Crimes of the Future. Cronenberg came back to body horror after years away, probably because he missed grossing people out. In his future world, pain doesn't exist and people perform surgery on each other for fun. This seemed like a logical next step for humanity. Viggo Mortensen plays Saul, whose body keeps growing new organs that he doesn't need. Instead of going to a doctor, he turns this into performance art. His partner, Caprice, cuts him open on stage while audiences watch and get aroused. Surgery is the new sex, according to the movie's tagline. The surgeries happen with these fancy machines that look like designer furniture. Caprice operates a high-tech autopsy table while spectators lean forward in anticipation. People moan with pleasure watching organs get removed. One person tells Saul they're jealous of his pain, which is probably not something you hear at normal movie theaters. Other characters have evolved even further. One guy has ears all over his body and does interpretive dance to show them off. Other person has their eyes and mouth shown shut, but seems perfectly content. Evolution is getting weird in Cronenberg's future. Who could have seen that coming? The most disturbing character is a kid who can eat plastic. His digestive system has mutated to process garbage. When he dies, they perform an autopsy on stage to study his modified organs. The audience treats this like educational entertainment. Cronenberg uses all of this weirdness to talk about art, evolution, and how we might adapt into environmental destruction. The plastic-eating kid represents humanity evolving to survive in a polluted world. The surgery performances ask whether body modification can be beautiful. Some people walked out of the premiere, but others praised Cronenberg for returning to his roots. The movie is more talky than his earlier work, but it still delivers plenty of gross surgical scenes. After 20 years away from body horror, he proved he could still make audiences uncomfortable. Some things never change. Personally, this is not my favorite movie on this list. It is interesting. It's a little talky though. It talks quite a bit. It kind of like strokes its own ego. But the worst body horror is when it's not even your body anymore. Brandon Cronenberg took his dad's obsession with flesh and technology, then asked what happens when someone else gets to drive your body around. Tasia is an assassin who uses brain brain implants to hijack people and make them commit murders in Possessor. The setup is simple. Tasia's consciousness gets beamed into some random person's head. She wears their body for a few days, kills whoever needs killing, and then forces them to off themselves. There's no evidence, no witnesses, just a tragic double murder that makes the news. But during her latest job, things go wrong. Colin, her current host, starts fighting back. His mind refuses to give up control. Two people end up sharing one body, both trying to steer. The visual effects show this internal war through nightmare sequences. Faces melt and merge together. Identities overlap and blur. Colin's face stretches over Tasia's features while she tries to stay in control. The practical effects make it look like two people are literally pulling the same face in different directions. What makes this worse than other possession movies is how intimate the violation feels. Tasia doesn't just use Colin's body. She reads his memories, speaks with his voice, and bangs his girlfriend while wearing his face. Come on, Tasia, you had to do my man like that? She becomes him more completely than he ever really was. The violence gets extremely personal too. When the two personalities clash, Colin's body convulses and attacks people with weapons he didn't choose to pick up. His hands move without his permission. His mouth says words he didn't think. By the end, neither personality wins clearly. The body survives, but it's unclear who's really driving. The film suggests that after someone else lives in your skin long enough, you might never get it back completely. This is body horror for the current digital age. Your flesh becomes a rental car for someone else's consciousness. And just like with car rentals, you probably ain't gonna get your deposit back when they're done with it. So there you have it. A bunch of different movies that made everyone deeply uncomfortable with the idea of having a body at all. Sweet dreams sleeping tonight. If you enjoyed watching this video, make sure to give it a like and subscribe to the channel for more content just like this. Also, YouTube just rolled out their hype feature, which you can give hype points to smaller creators like me to help our videos get seen in the algorithm. It is completely free and I would appreciate anyone that gave me some. If you want to watch more of my videos, then you can click the video on screen now.